Being a city officer not only makes you tougher, but it also fortifies you with a cynical armor that is more durable than a bulletproof vest. That was me, Lena, a 35-year-old lieutenant who became a private investigator with a backlog of mistrust greater than the number of cases I resolved. My rhythm: human dishonesty and cheating spouses. It's hardly exactly the setting for a romantic tale, is it? Then Michael arrived. Mr. Modern Art. Like a new brushstroke on a faded canvas, it entered my existence. This New York art event is where we first met. People who use terms like postmodern and avant-garde without a trace of sarcasm were all over the place. Feeling more like a fish on a bicycle than a fish in water, I was completely out of my element. Interesting piece, isn't it? Michael broke the ice by standing next me and staring at what appeared to be a heap of rubbish that had been artistically placed on a pedestal. I looked at the artwork, then back at him. If by interest you mean I've seen better-looking garbage in an alley, then yeah, fascinating. He uttered a deep, full-bodied chuckle that turned many heads. He said, "I'm Michael," and held out his hand. Before you ask, I don't understand modern art, Lena. I'm only here to help a pal. It's a welcome change. The majority of folks here act as though they can see things that aren't there. Ah, so you're an art truther. Before I knew it, we were getting coffee and discussing everything and nothing. Our banter came naturally. Michael was 40 years old, had the manners of a bygone age, and looked like he had walked out of a GQ magazine. After 6 months of living in a whirlwind relationship that seemed too wonderful to be true, I'm completely smitten. Reading poetry to me, taking me to the most beautiful exhibitions, and treating me as if I were the only lady in the world were all examples of Michael's old-world charm. Michael got down on one knee one night in the center of Central Park, beneath the stars. "Lena, will you marry me?" I made no hesitation at all. Yes, hell yes. The engagement was a happy blur. I couldn't help but see a future full of laughter, love, and children. However, you are aware of the adage against things that seem too good to be true. Michael's mother, Evelyn, served as my first reality check. She examined me with a stare that could make milk curdle. She was the epitome of the Ice Queen. "You're a detective." Then, when we had our first supper together, she said, "Isn't that a little unladylike?" Without wasting a beat, I snapped back, "Depends on what century your definition of ladylike comes from." Although Michael smiled tightly at me, I could see the caution in his eyes. "Lena's one of the best detectives in the city, Mom." Evelyn took a whiff. I suppose that's one way to meet men. I gritted my teeth and forced a grin. And here I believed it was to uphold justice and prevent crime. I'm being silly. Michael acted as a mediator during the strange ceasefire that ended with dinner. He squeezed my hand as we walked away. "Lena, she'll change her mind. Allow time." Every time Evelyn came to visit, she gave us a little tour of our lives. We had only been married for 2 weeks when she unexpectedly stopped by on a Tuesday night, bringing a cold with her. She said, "Lena, darling," with a condescension so thick that a knife could cut through it. "You seem to be holding on to your little employment. I had thought that you would have become a decent lady after marriage." The knife in my hand suddenly seemed very attractive for purposes other than cooking as I chopped veggies for supper. In my hometown, Evelyn, we refer to this as earning a living. Instead of surviving off of other people, you need to give it a try someday. Her lips pressed together, but she remained calm. Michael had certain expectations growing up. Making the decision to pursue a more respectable career is still possible. Something that isn't as macho. Reputable. Like becoming a professional busybody, is that right? Without trying to hide the venom in my voice, I shot back. "Thanks, but no." I'll continue to catch liars and cheats. In relation to that, how is your bridge club doing?" At that moment, Michael entered, his timing as perfect as ever. He glanced from me to his mother and said, "What's going on here?" With an overly sweet tone, Evelyn remarked, "Your wife was just explaining her career choice to me. It seems I've underestimated the thrill of working with criminals." Michael rubbed the bridge of his nose and groaned. "Lena is concerned about her work. Mom, she is who she is." He turned to face me and said, "And Lena," his eyes beseeching, "please, let's not do this now." I wanted to dispute with him and let him know that his mother was acting inappropriately. I refrained, though, because this was his mother. I murmured, "Fine," and turned back to my veggies with more effort than was required. Evelyn's visits were typically followed by anxious evenings. Michael would distance himself and withdraw into a shell that I was unable to penetrate. He was obviously on someone else's side, and it wasn't me. One such occasion, I approached Michael following an especially taxing visit from Evelyn, who had critiqued everything from my cooking to the way I folded towels. "Why don't you ever stand up for me? Your mother treats me like I'm the dirt under her shoe, and you've just let her. What kind of marriage is this?" Michael looked at me weary. "Lena, she's old, set in her ways. What do you want me to do to sound her?" "No, I want you to have my back. To tell her she can't walk all over me." "Us, is that too much to ask?" He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I'll talk to her, okay. Just give it time." But she didn't come around. Neither did he. The divide grew. Evelyn's disdain and Michael's inaction wedging a gap between us that felt insurmountable. It was clear this was more than just a rough start. This was a glimpse into what my future held if something didn't change. Living with Michael started to feel like I was in one of those dramatic TV shows where the cracks slowly start showing in the perfect facade. He worked at this fancy art gallery, which sounded posh until you realized his paycheck was as unpredictable as the weather in spring. Meanwhile, I was doing pretty well for myself, pulling in enough to keep us comfortable, living in a spacious apartment in a nice part of the city. I remember one evening, the conversation at dinner turned toward the future. I was talking about maybe eventually wanting to buy a house, have a bit of space for when we decided to start a family. Michael, fork halfway to his mouth, paused and gave me this look. "Lena, I'm not sure where you're getting these ideas from. We don't need a house. And me getting another job, that's not on the table." I put my fork down, trying to keep my voice level. It's not about needing Michael. It's about planning for the future, and it wouldn't hurt to have a more stable income, you know. He laughed, a sound that used to warm my heart, but now just grated on my nerves. "You and your obsession with money. It's always about the bottom line with you, isn't it?" "Money isn't everything, Lena." I could feel the anger bubbling up inside me. Easy for you to say when you're not the one worrying about paying the bills every month. I'm not obsessed with money. I just don't want to end up struggling. Michael shrugged, going back to his food like we were discussing the weather. "I'm happy with our life as it is. You're the one who's never satisfied." I stood up, my appetite gone. Maybe I wouldn't be so focused on money if you contributed more than just criticism about how I manage ours. He didn't look up. "I contribute in other ways. Not everything is about money, Lena." That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thoughts racing. It wasn't just about the house, or the kids, or even the money. It was about respect, partnership, and support, none of which seemed to matter to Michael as long as the status quo kept his life easy. His accusations of my so-called obsession with money were a convenient deflection from his unwillingness to confront the reality of our situation. On what started as a mundane Sunday, the living room transformed into the stage for an unexpected drama. When Evelyn, my not-so-beloved mother-in-law, decided it was the perfect day for a visit, with her arrival came an air of tension thick enough to slice through. She was glued to her phone, her voice fluctuating between panic and confusion, as she navigated through a conversation that set off every red flag in my book. "And you're saying my social security number has been suspended. How much do I need to pay to fix this?" Evelyn's voice cracked as she fumbled through her purse, pulling out her checkbook and a slew of documents. Her hands trembled with a mix of age and fear. I was in the kitchen, coffee in hand, when my ears picked up the mention of Social Security and payment. Years on the force had honed my instincts, and every fiber of my being screamed scam. I rushed into the living room, my approach silent but swift. "Evelyn, hang up the phone. It's a scam." I interjected, my voice firm yet composed, hoping to convey urgency without inciting panic. She whipped around, eyes wide with shock and offense. "I beg your pardon. I'm handling this, Lena. There's no need for your intrusion." But before she could continue her protest, I reached out my hand, clamping down on the phone, and ended the call with a decisive click. The room fell into a stunned silence, the air thick with tension. Evelyn recoiled as if I had slapped her, her face contorting into an expression of fury and disbelief. "How dare you?" she hissed. That was incredibly rude and uncalled for. "Who do you think you are, treating me like some knave child?" Michael, drawn into the living room by the commotion, stood at the threshold, his expression a mix of concern and frustration. "Lena, what's going on? Why are you upsetting my mother?" I turned to him, my frustration mounting. That call was from scammers, Michael. They were trying to con Evelyn out of her money by claiming her Social Security number was suspended. This is a common tactic. I've seen it 100 times. Michael rubbed the back of his neck, a gesture I knew meant he was in a tight spot. "Okay, but couldn't you have been a bit more diplomatic about it?" Evelyn, gathering her things with trembling hands, shot me a look that could curdle milk. "I don't need to be saved, especially not by someone who treats me with such disrespect. I'm leaving. We'll see what the bank says about this so-called scam." She stormed out, leaving a cold silence in her wake. Michael sighed, looking between the door and me. "Lena, I know you meant well, but you have to handle things more gently, especially with my mother." I felt a twinge of guilt, but stood my ground. I know it seemed hard, but there wasn't time for pleasantries. Scammers rely on creating a sense of urgency. Hesitation could have cost her dearly. The next day, curiosity and a hint of guilt nudged me to call Evelyn. The phone rang 3 times before she answered, her voice cold and clipped. "What do you want, Lena?" "I just wanted to check in after yesterday. Did you talk to the bank about the call?" There was a pause, and when she spoke, her voice was laced with reluctant admission. "Yes, I did. They confirmed it was a scam. But that doesn't change how you handled the situation. You were rude and aggressive." I pinched the bridge of my nose, a headache brewing at the edge of my temples. "I'm sorry if I came across that way. I was just trying to protect you from getting scammed. These people are professional liars, and they're very good at what they do." Her response was off, tinged with a begrudging sort of gratitude. "Well, I suppose I should thank you for preventing a mistake. But don't think this means I approve of your methods or your attitude. Goodbye, Lena." The chill between Michael and me had settled in deep, turning our home into more of a frosty standoff than a warm haven. I clung to the hope that his upcoming birthday might thaw the ice. A chance to fan the dying embers of our relationship, dreaming of a weekend filled with just the two of us. I planned every detail, hoping to rekindle what was once there. But as fate, or rather, Evelyn, would have it, She bulldozed through my plans with her own agenda, setting up a grand dinner at her mansion on a weekday of all times, knowing my schedule was jam-packed. It felt like a deliberate jab. I pleaded with her over the phone. "Can't we just push it to Saturday? I'm swift at work, Evelyn." Her voice was a mix of honey and ice. "No, dear. This is when it's happening. Michael shouldn't have to adjust his birthday around your occupations." Biting back frustration, I found myself confiding in my boss, the only person who seemed to get it. He'd seen enough deceit and betrayal to fill a noir novel, yet he understood the importance of this gesture. "Go," he urged with a knowing look. "Do what you need to do." Arriving at Evelyn's, the party was in full swing, a spectacle of Fauve's merriment. Evelyn spotted me like a shark sensing blood, her smile tight as she hastily whispered something to Michael. There he was, Michael, my husband, ensconced by the fireplace, his arm around a woman who was clearly more than just a casual acquaintance. My heart twisted, but I steeled myself and approached Michael. "Aren't you going to introduce me?" I asked, injecting a calm I didn't feel into my voice. He jerked like he'd been electrocuted, his eyes wide. "Ah, Lena, this is Aisha from the gallery," he mumbled, then turned to her. "And this is Lena, a relative." The room might as well have spun. A relative. Seriously, Michael. Your wife, remember. I couldn't keep the incredulity and anger from my voice, the words echoing louder than intended. A hush fell over the room, all eyes on us. Michael's face remained a mixture of embarrassment and irritation, flashing across his features. "You know, a real wife would have made her husband's birthday a priority," he retorted sharply, turning away as if dismissing me from his presence. Before I could recover, Evelyn slithered over, her voice dripping with disdain. "You see, Lena, you just don't fit in here. Michael needs someone supportive, like Aisha, not whatever this is." Her words were a slap, each one designed to cut. "I think it's best if you leave." "You're clearly not wanted here," she hissed, gesturing toward the door, as if banishing me from my own life. "You know what, Evelyn? Maybe you're right. Maybe I don't belong in a family that thrives on lies and deception." With dignity I barely felt, I walked out, the silence of the night wrapping around me like a cold embrace. After the debacle at Michael's birthday and the cold truth that followed, I knew I needed solid proof if I was going to end this marriage on my terms. The thought of tailing Michael myself was too much. I'm used to digging up dirt on strangers, not the man I once thought I'd grow old with. So I turned to Dave, a colleague of mine with a knack for uncovering the most discreet affairs. "Hey Dave, I need a favor," I said, trying to keep my voice steady over the phone. "Anything for you. What's up?" His reply was immediate, the loyalty in his voice a small comfort in my storm of betrayal. "It's Michael. I know he's seeing someone." "I need evidence," I confessed, feeling a mix of relief and dread, admitting it out loud. "Say no more. I'll handle it discreetly. You'll have what you need in no time," Dave assured me, his confidence soothing some of my anxiety. True to his word, Dave delivered photos, audio clips, the works. It was damning. The woman, Aisha, was indeed more than just a colleague. Worse, she was here illegally, looking for a quick marriage to secure her status. She was also a fraud. Part of me wanted to confront Michael, to throw the evidence in his face and watch him squirm. But then I remembered the condescending remarks, his dismissive attitude, and that smug look he always had. No, he didn't deserve my concern or my help. Filing for divorce felt like ripping off a Band-Aid on a wound that had been festering for too long. I demanded financial compensation for his betrayal. It was the least he could do after everything. The fallout was explosive. Evelyn, ever the dragon lady, took his side, painting me as the villain. But I stood my ground, fueled by the evidence and the injustice of their accusations. The ink on the divorce papers wasn't just dry. It was a testament to a new chapter I was desperate to write for myself. Opening my own detective agency wasn't just a dream come true. It was a rebirth, a new dawn. From the ashes of my past life with Michael, the agency quickly gained a reputation for discretion and effectiveness, a reflection of the lessons learned from my personal saga. One day, as the sun poured into my new office, illuminating the framed license on the wall, Jessie, my right-hand woman and friend, popped her head in. "Boss lady, you've got a minute. We've got a potential big case. A woman suspecting her husband of having an affair wants the full works. Surveillance, photos, the lot." I couldn't help but smile at the irony. Sounds like our bread and butter. Do we have details? Jessie nodded, laying the file on my desk. "Yeah, but there's a catch. She's got a tight budget. Really tight." I thought about it for a moment. This was my chance to pay it forward, to help someone who was possibly in the same boat I'd been in not so long ago. Tell her we'll work with her budget, and Jess, let's make sure we're thorough. I know too well what it's like being on the other side of this. Jess's grin was wide. "Knew you'd say that. You're a good person, you know that." Try telling that to my ex, I quipped, but the jest didn't reach my eyes. The case was as straightforward as it gets in our line of work. Infidelity, secrets, and lies. A pattern I'd become all too familiar with. But with each case we closed, I felt a piece of myself heal, a validation of my decision to start anew. One morning, as the city was slowly waking up, an elderly lady stormed into my office, her frustration palpable. She was ranting to my receptionist about her son's wife, who had apparently vanished with a considerable amount of money, leaving them in financial ruin. She insisted on speaking with the owner, mentioning something about needing a payment plan. Curious, I decided to meet her myself. Imagine my surprise when I came face to face with Evelyn, my former mother-in-law. The shock in her eyes mirrored mine, but embarrassment quickly took over her features. "I run this agency, Evelyn. How can I help?" I managed to say, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. Recognition dawned on her, followed by a flicker of shame. But true to form, she recovered quickly, her desperation making her bold. "Lena, you have to help me find her, the woman who ran off with my son's money. Michael's in shambles. Do it for the family's sake, without charge." The audacity of her request left me speechless for a moment. The same woman who sided with Michael, without a second thought, now stood in my office, asking for a favor as if the past had never happened. "Evelyn, first, we're not family. Second, I run a business, not a charity for wayward ex-in-laws." I responded, my tone firm. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on me, but I wasn't about to let old wounds dictate my decisions. "But Lena, after everything, can't you do this one thing?" "It's the least you could do," she pressed, her voice a mix of plea and demand. I couldn't help but laugh, albeit bitterly. "The least I could do, Evelyn. After your son cheated on me, you expect me to just forgive and forget. I suggest you go to the police. They're better equipped to handle missing persons and fraud." She stood there, flabbergasted, as if the thought of me refusing her had never crossed her mind. "But Lena." "No, Evelyn. I learned a valuable lesson from Michael, and from you. Never trust scammers and liars." "It's time you learned the same," I interrupted. My decision was final. Life indeed comes full circle, but it's up to us to decide how we close that loop. For me, it was by standing firm in my values and looking forward, not back. My phone rang with a number I had assumed I had deleted from my life, only a week after Evelyn's little incident in my office. "Michael, It seemed like I was returning to a world I had left behind when I saw his name flash on the screen. My curiosity overcame me, and I responded, "Michael, what do you want?" I spoke in a reserved tone, preparing for whatever speech he had in store. "I've been thinking a lot, Lena." He declared, "I want us to start over, get back together, and have children." I once thought his voice was sincere, but it had that old, familiar mix of optimism. It was impossible for me not to snort. "Really? And in your ideal, where would we reside?" His response had a tinge of enthusiasm. "Oh, everything is prearranged. After we gather some money and move in with my mom, you may purchase a large home for us. It will be flawless." This time, I laughed more loudly as the ridiculousness of the circumstance struck me hard. "Michael, your haughtiness has not diminished. Do you really believe that I would come back only to play house with you and your mother, and then pay for a large house?" The desperation in his voice was evident as he stammered over his words. "But I've changed, Lena. Everything may be fixed by us. Please." We were silent as I thought about the years lost, the tears cried, and the arduous process of reconstructing myself from the wreckage he had left behind. "You haven't changed at all, Michael. Goodbye." I hung up after saying that. The gesture's finality closed the door on the past. A feeling of calm descended onto my heart as the quiet descended around me. Even though the call was ridiculous, it was the last confirmation of my development, fortitude, and self-reliance. If I had remained stuck in a marriage that made me feel less of myself, I would never have been able to create a new life, a prosperous profession, and a feeling of self again. Michael's call served as a brief reminder of my progress, and only a blip on the radar. The horizon in front of me was bright and full of promise. It was a blank canvas waiting to be filled with new goals, challenges, and successes. I knew I was prepared for whatever came next as I returned my focus to the work that had given me meaning and a feeling of community. Living well is, after all, the finest kind of retaliation, and that's exactly what I plan to do.